Hello and welcome to the Magical Midlife Podcast, where you get a refreshing, uplifting and optimistic perspective on life in your 40s and 50s. I'm your host, Lindsay DeSwart, and I'm delighted that you've joined us here today, so let's jump right in. Hi and welcome to the show today. Today's guest I know you're going to be truly inspired by. Her name is Anissa Buckley, and she is an incredible woman who has achieved so much. Her most recent business is B-untethered, which you're going to hear more about in our talk today. Before that, however, she has founded and built 2 successful nutrition companies, which she's then gone on to sell. She's advised at the White House to help them with some nutrition incentives in the USA. She has also summited Mount Kilimanjaro. She cycled the Garden Route in South Africa. She's completed multiple Ironman competitions. And as you can imagine, she is a woman who really achieves what she set out to do. However, in today's conversation, she breaks it all down into the smallest steps for you to make anything seem achievable. So I think you're going to love this. Just put the kettle on, get a cup of tea, and enjoy the conversation today. So, hey, Anissa, how are you?
Hey, I am great. I'm so happy to be here.
Oh, so am I. And we just had a bit of a pre-chat, and holy cow, have we got some fun stuff to cover today.
Definitely. I mean, you and I, the stars aligned, you know, we think alike. So I'm looking forward to this.
Yeah, fantastic. So Anissa, what I would love to start with today is for you just to give us a little bit of a background. Obviously, I know a bit about you, but you're going to tell the story way better than I am. So if you could do that, and then I think we're going to dig into some of that because you've got so many fantastic adventures to talk about. And I'm going to live vicariously through you today, actually, if that's all right.
That's awesome. I mean, vice versa. You've got a pretty good life yourself. Yeah, I mean, I could go all the way back to infantile days, but I won't do that to you. Basically, I spent about 15 years in corporate America, doing a lot of marketing and sales for big companies like P&G, Sprint, and Reebok. And then I actually founded a database, which was one of the first to supply grocery retailers with health claims. So if you went into a grocery store like a Whole Foods and you saw a shelf tag that said gluten-free or good source of fiber, that probably originated with the database that I started. And so that really got me into the world of health and wellness way back in like the early 2000s. And I did sell that company and ended up, doing a lot of work with large grocery retailers around the country, implementing health and wellness plans. And so from there, and I did get to go to the White House with that, which was the coolest thing. I got to meet with the Obama's personal chef. Yes, wow. That was super cool. And talk about the Let's Move program and what we could do. But I came out of that. And the reason I did is my mom had dementia at a fairly young age, unfortunately. And I knew that time was limited with her. And I'd been on planes literally for like years, every week. So I wanted to change my life. So I started a small fitness studio in an upstate New York town because that's where my parents were. And we offered fresh 500-calorie meals, fitness training, and health coaching under one roof. And it was wonderful. I loved it. Got to work really one-on-one with people trying to shift their lifestyle. So for me, that was the beginning point of really getting passionate about seeing change with people and changing their lives and how much better they felt when they did that. So again, ran that company. But unfortunately, as I was doing that, about a year and a half later, both of my parents passed away within about 8 months of each other. And then I was also in the midst of going through a divorce after a 12-year marriage. And ultimately, we decided to sell the company because actually my spouse and I were both in it together. So sort of all of this transition happened at once. And what that did for me was completely shifted my life because I'd been a workaholic. My whole life was head down, minute to minute meetings, couldn't get to the bathroom half the day because it was like, you're so busy. And then everything was rushing and what's my next goal? And then once my parents died, it's almost like lightning struck. Something hit me and it just made me wake up and say, okay, that's it. Like they're gone. And I was very close with my parents. So first of all, it was devastating. It was very hard for me because it was really unexpected with my mom how that dementia came about. And then ultimately she had a massive stroke and sort of overnight went. And my parents had been married for 65 years. So my dad had such a hard time dealing with that, which of course was really hard to watch, right? He was upset every day. So long story short, I'm telling you every detail of my life. I'm sorry, but moving that forward, ultimately what I decided to do after I sold the business, I sort of lost my identity, to be honest, because everything had been wrapped up in work most of my life. And so once that happened, an opportunity sort of presented itself with a former British pro cyclist to actually start traveling and doing training. And so what really changed the most was I really downgraded my life. And so before that, everything was flying first class, not because I spent the money, but because I flew so much, I was always upgraded. You're running into the same types of hotels, the Wi-Fi is guaranteed, the rental cars are there. Everything is like clockwork to some degree. Yeah. And I started traveling with this gentleman. And first of all, he was of the mindset that he was sort of like traveling with a Navy SEAL, sort of like living with a Navy SEAL for your life. And I had no idea what I was getting into, right? I mean, I was one of those like, okay, I'd get on the treadmill for 30 minutes. That was my workout. Great, done. Check the box, go back to work. And we went from like really kind of, running companies to all of a sudden 24/7 physicality. So, we had several trips, but he really got me into ironmanning, cycling, huge mountains, hiking, to high altitude. Hiking huge mountains. I did. I mean, I have to say, I feel very, very blessed. My life has been amazing and I just fell into it, to be honest with you. It just happened that way. I really do feel like the perfect storm happened and it's not the perfect, it's horrible that my parents both passed away. It was devastating, but coming out of that, it changed my life dramatically. And so he and I traveled and I sold everything. So I sold my house, obviously with the divorce, I sold all my possessions. And basically we lived in an RV, we lived in tents, we lived in Airbnbs around the world for about 4 years. And, our first stop was South Africa, Cape Town, which is just one of the most beautiful cities in the world. I think. I really do. It's fabulous. You've been there?
Yeah.
Love it. So we started there and we cycled like Chapman's Peak, which is this amazing, vista where you're seeing the ocean as you're riding, you're climbing. And, I learned really quickly that was a passion of mine, to be out in nature, to be pushing myself hard. So that's kind of like, that brings us into really sort of the late 20 teens, right? So like the 2017, 2018 timeframe. And he and I ultimately split. And, after that, basically, COVID has happened, right? We've kind of been dealing with that. And I've had various jobs, consulting and doing things like that. But, we can talk later about this, but I've moved that forward to actually found a company that helps other women coming through, because I was going through menopause. I didn't really explain this very well, but essentially, I turned 50 years old in the middle of this. And as I've told you before we got on, we started talking more publicly here. Basically I was in the best shape of my life at 51 years old. And I'm coming through something else, unfortunately, this year, but I still believe that, if you stay with it, you can accomplish anything you want to accomplish physically. Yeah. It's just having the desire and the knowledge of how to do that.
So let me wind it back a bit. So when you were working with all the health companies, and then you got to the stage where you created the health, let's say, gym with the fitness and all the rest of it. If you were just like a 30-minute gym bunny before that, what was the catalyst for you to do that? Because you'd have thought that you'd have to be a complete health disciple in order to even have that idea.
Yeah. Well, for me, I had always been interested in health and wellness. So, hence I started the nutrition database and sold it well before that. So I had the experience and the knowledge of working with the FDA, of understanding how to label meals. And I just watched the market, to be honest with you. And I saw that there was a need at that time. This was back in 2013, 2012. there was a need to have, this was before, let me back up. This was before the Menu Labeling Act came out, which is, I don't know how much you know about that, but you have to put calories on menus and things.
Yeah.
So way before that, I realized it would be helpful for people to have prepared meals and a plan so that they knew, okay, I'm having 1,800 calories today. I'm going to go to a high intensity, a HIIT class at this facility. And I've got a health coach if I need counseling or help and want to talk through, some challenges.
Yeah.
So it was sort of a brainchild. I've been always somewhat on the innovative side. So I led innovation for a couple companies. So it's kind of my nature.
Okay.
Not so good with always executing things. Trust me, that's not my thing, but I love to think pie in the sky, like, what can we do with this? So, the idea came because, it really sprung from the nutrition side. And then the gym piece of it came because I did love fitness. I just never really had enough time for it because I had all these, these other jobs going on. And so, I had been taking a class actually at a local gym, which was really what inspired it because I just loved the HIIT training I was doing. And that's what sort of, I thought, well, why don't we put this together in one roof? And we did. So
fantastic. And then my next question is, did you actually get help with dealing with the loss of your parents? Because that was like really sudden. And that is, a huge major life event and clearly a catalyst that did change your life.
Wow, this is interesting. I didn't share this. But so the day that my mom passed away, unfortunately, well, let me phrase this another way. We opened the doors to our new facility that we were, the fitness studio that I was mentioning to you, 2 days after my mother passed away.
Oh,
so
that's tough.
It was horrible because the advertising was out there. We had publicly said we're opening the doors. We had people already signed up for the program. So what do you do? Right. You're not going to not open.
Yeah.
I say that it was an option, of course, but not one that I felt we could take. And so, that was extremely hard. And yet, it just forced me honestly to suppress. Right. So I didn't really deal with it, to be honest with you, for about 1.5 years. Right. Because I was running this business. I was getting up at 5 a.m, going to bed at 11, everything was work in between. And ultimately, when I did take off, I think I learned, years later, I understand this. I took that sort of intent focus and I transferred that to Ironman training. And so then everything became physical training. And so much so, I was actually almost hospitalized the first trip I came back from because I was severely anemic because I wasn't really eating properly. And I was literally, my body was not used to, probably I would call it 12-hour a day training because we'd be on a bike for 80 miles. We'd come back. I'd swim maybe for a half an hour. We would have to walk. We didn't have cars. So this guy, I'm telling you, was a Navy SEAL. Basically we would go to the grocery store, get literally liters of water, all the food we needed, and walk literally uphill with backpacks with, who knows, 25, 30 pounds on your back. On top of all the exercise. So it was just constant, weight training. I could go on, but, that lifestyle was what, first of all, ultimately got me in amazing shape. But
I'm sure
initially my body went through shock. And then mentally, it was really, really challenging because, I think I just diverted my grief, quite honestly. And sort of refunneled that into hard training to just express my frustration, my angst, my probably anger over losing. I don't know, I don't even know really. But to answer your question, I did not get help anytime immediately for at least probably 4 years. I did ultimately see a therapist for about 1 year because there's just a lot of circumstances with that, right? It wasn't just them, but it was like just that whole life transformation of, going from first class to literally, we didn't have electricity or water in the RV. I was sleeping in parking lots that had crack addicts and using bathrooms in like 24-hour fitness gyms. And it was a dramatic change in life. And I'd been used to, your food is kind of on the table. And then all of a sudden you're like, I'm eating this guy was like, I love him dearly. We're still good friends, but yet, he had grown up in an orphanage in London. And had a very different life experience, shall we say, than I did. So, that was the biggest piece is we were diametrically opposed in our value system. And so, we were initially constantly headbutting because I was a princess. I really was used to things. And he, I remember getting on the tube with like my bike box with me and my luggage, which weighed like 50 pounds because I was going away for months at a time. And it was like, I just remember everything being schlepped. And one time we landed in Dar es Salaam in Tanzania, and it was the middle of the night, and he insisted that we get an Uber. I'm like, there is no Uber here. People don't even have cars here. What are you thinking? And he's like, well, we're not taking a cab. It's too much money. And so, I mean, we were constantly arguing over like the most ridiculous things because his lifestyle was that. And I sort of eventually like succumbed to that and changed my life. And I'm glad I did, because I've learn to appreciate things. I know what I can live with and what I can live without.
Yes.
And it's
great
really
boundaries.
I do not need 45 pair of, black shoes and, designer bags anymore. So it's freeing, and the other thing is just, I could go off. I could talk all day, but yes, off on a tangent.
Fantastic. I love it. Excellent. Okay. Out of all of your accomplishments and achievements, and there are many, which are the ones that you're most proud of?
Wow, that's a hard question. I guess what I'm proud of, starting and selling companies is extremely hard. I have a lot of admiration for anybody who goes through that process, because it is a roller coaster. And you probably know that too with your podcast. I mean, you live and die by the moment of like, are we
I wouldn't quite compare it to selling companies, but yes, let's say that anyway.
I mean, that probably, because this is crazy to say, but I know my dad was very proud the first time I sold the company. And I think that was nice to feel that I'd done something that, he appreciated. But I would say the physical stuff, I don't think about it a whole lot, but yet, taking off and living for periods of time in different places and really experiencing like the culture of the Himalayas. That would be one thing I would say. The first time I ever summited, it was Thorong Pass. It's like the Annapurna circuit. It's about 140 miles. And you're carrying everything, but you're sleeping in these little tea houses, which are fabulous. I mean, honestly, if you've ever thought about it, I would highly encourage it. Have you ever been to the Himalayas? It's just.
No, I haven't. Funny thing is, my husband actually as a child lived in Nepal.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing.
Yeah. So random.
And so different now, I bet. I mean, I've been back a couple of times and it's changed dramatically. And I wouldn't say that as a positive. I mean, now you can get Wi-Fi everywhere. It's like, it's great, but it's not great. Right.
Yeah. Fair enough.
But anyway, the first time I did that, I thought I was in a phenomenal shape. I had just done my first full Ironman. And I mean, I just felt like, okay, I rule the world, right? I can do anything.
For sure.
So I'm hiking in the Himalayas. I've got, 25, 30 pounds on my back. I'm, schlepping along up the climb on my way up to the top, which is like 18.5 is the top of, that's feet. I don't know what, 5,400 meters maybe. So I'm walking, and this little Himalayan woman, this little Nepalese woman runs by me. She's at least 60 years old. Now, I know aging is a little different over that, but she was definitely 60 years old. She had a 60-pound bag of rice on her back, and she's walking in rubber sandals, and she just literally blows me away. She toasts me, right? And I am just like, oh my God. But what an awakening, because that's a lifestyle thing. And that started my passion for what I'm doing now, which is understanding the impact of lifestyle. And even especially as we age, we tend to think, well, it's going to happen. I'm going to gain weight. I'm going to, lose muscle mass. My brain isn't going to work as acutely. But the reality is that we don't have to just accept that anymore. And science now tells us that we can make changes. So anyway, that was an awakening for me. And I'm proud of myself. For a lot of those hikes. I mean, they really are, I never thought about it. And one more story, and then I'm going to like zip it. But when I was in Kilimanjaro, no, I mean, really, I could talk all, you're like, does this girl ever stop? But I went to Kilimanjaro, and this was really hard because we petitioned the government not to have a porter. And that's a big deal there because that's a revenue source for them. Yeah. So we were approved. And so we carried our own weight, and they will then if you're going with a guide, they will only let the guides carry a very minimal amount of weight. And so Richard, the guy I was with, and I had to carry everything else. And so I had 40 pounds. He had 75 pounds on his back summiting Kilimanjaro, which is about 19.3, I guess, in feet. So anyway, so my point is, we get very close to the top, and Richard was having a really hard time. And I mean, he was like the most fit man on the planet, quite honestly. I think he won one of your, what do you call it? It's not Tough Mudder. It's Tough Man, Tough Guy. I think you have those
really?
races.
I don't know.
Or something. I don't know. Yeah. Anyway, so we get toward the top. And all of a sudden I see these two porters, sort of arm in arm carrying this man down. And the man was screaming, "Help me, help me." And I had never, and this sounds so shallow, but I had never really considered, like, geez, would I have a problem with altitude? He had altitude sickness, which is super serious on the brain,
say it's
right?
bad, isn't it?
And you got to get down as fast as you can. That's the whole thing. And there's no help there, really. I mean, it's like you're up there and you're kind of on by yourself, right? Yeah. So it's like, if you have that problem, it's a serious deal. And I literally started crying because I hadn't ever taken it that seriously. I just was like, oh, it's a new adventure. Let's go do this. And so I think I have more of an appreciation now for some of the things I've been fortunate enough to have done, or been dragged through in some cases. And now it's like, okay, you know what? I am much more grateful that my body can withstand some of the things it can, that I've been able to, do some of these events. And, not everybody can. It's not just a matter of will sometimes. I mean, literally that's a hereditary thing. You either have the DNA, you can go to altitude, or you don't. I mean, honestly. So anyway, so that was sort of an awakening. And I'm, I pat myself on the back for having an awakening, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, well, absolutely. I mean, it's funny that you say that, but it's especially because you've obviously pushed yourself so hard through your corporate life. And then when you come to a physical challenge, as you say, you either have the DNA or you don't. And obviously you train very, very hard for it, but maybe you needed to push yourself that hard in order to have that humble awakening.
Yeah. Yeah.
Some people may get it carrying heavy grocery bags to the shop if that's not something they're used to, but you needed to push yourself to that limit in order to have that awakening. So fair enough.
Yeah, it was like a slap in the head. Like, okay, do not take this for granted, and especially going back to my parents. I mean, my parents were not really super, physical people. My mom, basically was a stay-at-home, homemaker, and my dad worked, and my dad would walk 3 miles every night, but he wasn't, they didn't do some of the things that we've mentioned here. And so, I think, I don't even know where I was going with that. It's just, it was sort of, I didn't grow up in that environment. And I just, I appreciate now, like, my health and my ability to do some of these things at an age where, my mom never would have thought about it, and you too. I mean, you're in great shape and you do these things. And so, I think, again, I know that you can bring your body back. There's been studies. Berkeley, you did a study several years back that showed that postmenopausal women can actually regain their VO2 max. Their study over 12 weeks, women regained 16% of their VO2 max, and you lose about 1% a year. So 16 years of life of VO2 max they regained in this 12-week program. So it's possible in muscle strength too. You know that. So I could talk about that.
It's funny that you talk about, and we are going to talk about it as we go on, but I did a half marathon, and it was my first one in a while. And I reckon I was probably right in the middle of perimenopause. And I just didn't realize it at the time. I was on the bandwagon of, you're just getting older. Maybe my body can't do it anymore. And then I thought logically and went, hold on a minute, I'm really struggling with this. And I just never settled into the training. It was just uncomfortable the whole way. And then I thought, hold on a minute, that lady's at least 30 years older than me, and she's just shot past me and she's smiling all the time. So what the heck is going on here? And of course, I didn't realize that I was in a phase, and that obviously I was actually going to come out of the other side. But because I didn't even know what the phase was, I didn't realize I was in it. So
right. And that can affect you, psychologically. You're like, oh, I'm getting older. I'm going to decline. Really I'm going downhill. And then, unless and that's the whole thing is like, we have the opportunity to share that knowledge that, there's really hard times in perimenopause and menopause, and everybody's unique, right? What happened to you is different than what happened to me. But there's so much information now, and there's so many helpful, lifestyle changes, supplements, actually, exercise obviously helps to some degree, depending on what you're doing. but all that is a factor. And of course, also yoga, operating your parasympathetic system, so recovery and relaxing yourself. And because we have heightened anxiety also in menopause. That is, many women do. Obviously it doesn't happen to everybody, but it's a big factor. And so there's so many things that we can consider doing to help ourselves get through this thing easier than you and I probably
absolutely
did,
and I think
right?
also just talking about what people are experiencing now, and you're saying about heightened anxiety, so many people, just because of COVID and being locked up, have heightened anxiety, and we're dealing with our kids heightened anxiety and all the rest of it. So in fact, living a healthier life by doing things in order to combat that heightened anxiety is going to help us through menopausal years. And I think something that we apparently both seem to really be on the same page about is there is so much good stuff that we can learn about ourselves. And yeah, it's a change, but it's not like the beginning of the end.
It is the beginning of the beginning,
beginning. So, okay, yes. Which brings us very nicely to, so what are you doing now? Because I can't wait to hear.
Oh, thank you. You set me up perfectly for that. Well, today we launched a company today. It's www. No, I need to say that anymore, right? B-untethered.com. So it's B-untethered, and it's untethering from all those societal unfortunate
expectation
norms but we're launching really, it's a number of things. It's an 8-week boot camp. That's one of the options, which basically is around using science to show you, giving you a personalized app that can help you shift your macronutrients for you specifically based on your height, your weight, your age, your activity level, a number of things, so that you're optimizing your intake of protein. The average woman needs to double her protein intake when she is in the years that we're in, hormone decline. So basically 30% of your diet should come from protein. And part of that is just having aminos circulating in your bloodstream, because first of all, we build muscle at a slower rate when we're this age, and we lose it faster. So that's why you start feeling a little saggier when you hit this. And so having those amino acids floating is a good thing. So you want to kind of evenly dose your protein throughout the day. You want to, of course, we know this, reduce your carbs, right? So 40% of calories so it's 40, 30, 30, 40% carbs, 30, 30 fats and proteins. And the carbs, again, you want to front load your day. So the app helps you plan that so that you can it's not about perfection here. It's just about, helping you directionally shift a little bit so that you are helping with that visceral fat around the middle. You're helping with your brain function. It can help with, mental acuity, sleeping better. A number of these things come from our diet, and then exercise is the other piece of this, which is strength training. It's a big one. So strength training and then HIIT training. So, what is funny is I do a lot of endurance stuff, but that's not really the best thing for us at this age. Really, it's about getting that heart rate up. It's about, because getting the heart rate up helps. I'm sure you know this, but, the blood sugar, right? So essentially, our bodies can't handle estrogen's a facilitator of moving sugar from your bloodstream into your muscles and cells. When you lose estrogen, you don't do that as efficiently, hence the need to do high intensity, which sort of creates this substitute that helps shuffle that blood sugar again. So getting high intensity in is important. And so making some of these lifestyle changes, this is what the boot camp is all about, is putting you together with other women in the same boat, and using the app and putting you on teams of 4 so that you're you've got these weekly goals. And we have meetings every week. So you're, kind of hitting these virtual meetings with your goals for strength and cardio with your team. And then you're, of course, using the app, and there's coaching. And then there's a mental aspect to it as well, because visions and values change, right? Your values change when you hit these ages because your kids are gone, your relationships change, your career might be stagnating, whatever. So you have to reassess. What do I want really for the next 5 or 10 or 20 years? So it's all about all of that. And then the other piece I'm going to just quickly say we're working on is called Train and Travel. And that is where you train for a period of time with us, and then we take an epic trip together, whether, we're looking at Park City actually for our first one in May. But it's, that's not super epic, but we've got 3 different levels of what epic is, right? Because we're all different, right? I mean, what one person might want to do, another may not. So we're launching. Anyway, there's the whole point. We're launching finally today. So yeah, so all that's kicking off, and our first boot camp is very close in. It's March 14th. It starts. For 8 weeks,
so that's pretty exciting. So if I can ask on a very personal level, how long ago did you dream up this project? I do.
And you don't even want to know that. I mean,
this is such a beautiful like view behind the scenes, unless you're going to tell me, oh, I did it last week actually, and I've just,
oh God, no, this has been the hardest. I've had 3 startups, right? This is by far the hardest. This has taken me, I've been thinking about this literally since 2015. So not exactly in the form that it's in, but definitely the train and travel, and how do I spread the word that, just getting out in nature and pushing yourself hard and really honestly, and we know this, right? Doing tough things, because it's the adversity. There's studies that show this, like people who have adversity in their life actually are more fulfilled at the end. And I believe that. So, it's that, the growth concept, right? You don't grow unless you really push yourself outside your comfort zone. And so, it started back then, and I did have a different company, believe it or not, that started, I was doing some corporate training around the concept of, the discomfort zone, being uncomfortable being comfortable in uncomfortable times. Anyway, it evolved into where we are today. So long story, it's been a long time.
Oh, this is just fantastic. I so wish we'd spoken years ago. If only I'd known. Yeah, really.
Me too.
Because just before COVID, I was actually planning my first retreat. So I was building this whole thing, and it was called Soulful Adventure Retreats, and my website now is Soulful Adventure Living. And that was all about, I said, can you imagine? Because I've been coaching for so long, and I always struggled with getting women to reach that bit further, to stretch themselves that bit further, to achieve what they're perfectly capable of, but what they've been dumbing down because they've just been trying to do everyday life. And so you do dumb down your big goals, your big dreams. And so I said, can you imagine like standing at the top of like a tree top trekking platform and thinking about that business you wanted to start, that challenge you wanted to do, that weight goal you wanted to accomplish. And actually, you're supported because you're on some physical mechanism that knows you're safe, that tells you you're safe. But it still takes a leap of faith. And I said, what better way to do it than to, go ziplining through the trees, screaming your head off as you go down there. And then you get down to the bottom and go, oh my goodness, I did that. And I said, what better metaphor? Which is why I wanted to take women on retreats to bring all of your goals, go and do brave things that you don't see as a challenge. And then you actually realize in your own cells and being that you've got this within you.
That's the train and travel thing, because it's the Kaizen method, right? So it's every week of small goals, right? It's not triggering that fear, that flight or fight
response,
part of your brain. It's methodically moving forward until all of a sudden you've done it. And that's, in all honesty, that's how you do an Ironman, right? You don't start off doing an Ironman. You start off just running 3 miles, 5 miles, and it just gradually builds over time. And it's the same thing. If you want to summit a mountain, if you want to start a business, anything that you do can follow that same trajectory. And honestly, what I have found, and I think there's research that says 65% of all people reach their goals if they have, a team behind them. But honestly, for me, I say this, I don't know if it's 100% true, but I feel very strongly that having a support system, having people behind me, having people training with me, triathlon training, the funnest part of it to me is being with everybody else. It's not, the race day is a blast. It's the funnest part of the whole thing, but it's having people with you, right? So whatever you're doing, being accountable. That's why we built that into B-untethered, that whole team-based challenge piece, because, when someone else is relying on you, it's harder to just not do it, or when you're having a really hard time, it's really nice to have somebody, kind of push, hey, you're fine. You got this. Come on, you can do this. So so that's kind of, I think we agree on that, but we should talk afterwards, right? We have to figure out a fun retreat.
This is so exciting. So it was born here on the Magical Midlife podcast.
Right. Come with us, ladies.
So is there anything, I mean, obviously you're just about to launch this new venture, which is super exciting. Is there anything else that you still want to do? Because, I mean, some of the accomplishments, you've been to the White House, you've sold companies, you've summited Kilimanjaro, you've done Ironmans, plus any others we need to throw in there.
Crazy
what do you
stuff.
still want to do? What's still a challenge for you?
It's a good question. I mean, there's lots of challenges, right? So there's a couple things. First of all, I do want to launch this company and really grow that to have the adventure challenges with women, because as you and I mentioned earlier, I think that women traditionally have thought, well, I'm physically not that strong. I'm aging. I can't do these things. And so I think it's helping women discover that they're capable of more in these ages. So that's number one. That's a passion of mine. And, like anybody else, find the love of my life, marry, live happily ever after, and keep challenging myself, So, I mean, I have a few things on the bucket list. I want to keep going higher. So Aconcagua, which is down in Argentina, is the next mountain. That's 23,000 feet. So that's kind of on the list. And I've got an Ironman this year, which I don't even want to talk about.
So you've done it before. So where's the struggle this time? Because I've done 2 marathons. My first marathon, it was just, the whole thing was an adventure. It was so fun. It went so well. It was just fantastic. My second marathon, hell on earth, from the moment I started training to the moment I was dragged over the finish line with a friend of mine going, why the heck did we do this? The experience was, it was an hour's difference in the time. It was just awful, the second one. So
I know. Well, I signed up 2 years. I signed up 2 years ago. The reason this is different, I didn't mention this, but I had surgery in October. For 3 years, I had something called hyperparathyroidism, which I didn't even know what it was. So people think thyroid, it has nothing to do with your thyroid gland. There's these 4 parathyroid glands behind your thyroid. They regulate all the calcium in your body. So with me, I was declining in my biking, my running, everything was declining, and I was becoming short of breath over 3 years. And I kept seeing my calcium scores were high. And so I do want to give a plug for this. If your calcium as a woman at any of our ages, 40s, 50s, 60s, if it's ever over 10, you've got a problem. 10. And don't ask me what the 10 is. It's your blood work. So just go and look, they'll tell you what your calcium levels are. Typically it'll be around 9.4 to 9.6. And it's like something per deciliter. Don't ask me the statistic, but basically the point is,
if the number's over 10,
the point is that, if you ever have it over 10, you're in trouble. So my physician, this is a sort of an unknown thing. He wasn't fully aware, and he kept telling me it was an insignificant issue. So long story short, I finally got to a point where I couldn't run a mile. I mean, I've done Ironman, I've hiked Himalayas. I couldn't run a mile. I'm not kidding. And I've been running since I was 18. So I was like, okay, I need to find a new doctor. And I did some online Googling. And what I found was this great doctor in Tampa, Dr. Norman, who has this whole facility. He's world renowned for this. And it's much higher, just so you know, in women, and also specifically in women in their 50s, like postmenopausal women, because it mirrors some of the symptoms of menopause. So you're tired, weight gain, hair falling out, this shortness of breath thing for me, which can be a VO2 max thing. So all of these things happened. And ultimately, I found a surgeon, and he went in and basically had 2 of the 4 glands were 10 times the size they should have been. So I had those removed October 1st, and my calcium went literally back to like normal the next day. And I've been recovering since then. So when you ask what's different about this Ironman, I'm starting from probably one of the lowest fitness levels I've ever had. Maybe not ever, but a pretty low fitness level for me. I'm still struggling with running. And so I'm building back, and that's going to be hard for me to get to literally Ironman status in like 5 months. I'm like,
because what's expected as well.
Yeah.
You know what it takes.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's what's different about this one. It's kind of a recovery thing. Yeah, it is for me. Yeah, it is. It's a big deal because I just had never expected. I mean, I was very fortunate to be in pretty great shape with all the travel and, training stuff I was doing for a long time. And then this happened, and it's almost like, some days I'm like, God is just kind of teaching me to have more respect for my health, because, like when it's taken away from you, you're all of a sudden like, holy cow. Like I had no idea, being able to just walk out the door and run 10 miles, I was never like, oh, wow, look at this, I can do this. And now I'm like 3 miles. I'm like, ooh, look at me. It's like, okay, we're inching back,
Wow.
but
Yeah, I'm just reading Tony Robbins' new book, Life Force. And
yeah,
he starts off with a healthy man has 1,000 goals or something like that. And the man with no health has one goal.
yeah, yeah. Isn't that the truth,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely. In
Yeah.
fact, it sounds like
If you don't have that, you got big
yeah,
problems.
seriously. It might be I don't know if you've already read it, but it might be a book that you enjoy. It sounds like it might be up your street.
I'm a Tony Robbins fan, so absolutely.
Fantastic.
Yep. Thank you for that.
Okay, conscious of time, always conscious of time on the podcast. So how can people find you and how can they be a part of this challenge?
So just go to the website, www.b-untethered.com. And we actually have a free downloadable guide, which is like 3 dimensions to, thriving in midlife. That, is just a freebie kind of sharing the knowledge, you know what I mean? Like just kind of helping people quickly understand, like there's changes I can make. So yeah. And then of course, boot camp will start in a couple of weeks. So love to have people sign up. Come join us.
Fantastic. Okay. So I've got one last question because this, I have to say, I'm very, very grateful for it. Our chat today has been super upbeat and super inspiring, which I love because that is the message that I'm trying to share with the midlife. If somebody is kind of in the doldrums a bit or still coming out of, the dark days of COVID restrictions, is there some piece of advice or something that you would get them to focus on that you think will help them to get out of the shadows of where they are so they can start making moves towards signing up for boot camp, joining in Magical Midlife, whatever it might be, just making really positive steps forward?
Yeah, I think the first thing I would say is make sure that maybe check with your physician or check with somebody to make sure there's nothing physiologically wrong. Giving what I just came out of, I didn't mention, but there was also a mental aspect. If you read about calcium, like my brain was disorganized. So,
okay.
Get yourself checked physically. And then, my thing really is getting out with other people. I know not everybody is the same way, but I do think accountability is a huge factor. And so sort of determining like, what is it that lights you up? That's a big deal. And I think that people belittle that a lot. Like, oh, that's what kids do. You have these dreams, but in my belief is that everybody has passions. And so you got to sort of rediscover what that passion is. And once you figure that out, then find other people who are doing it and sort of try to connect yourself, but small bits at a time, right? Because it's really easy to get overwhelmed, especially if you're not feeling your best and think, oh my God, I'm never going to be able to do it. But just give yourself one small goal. Week 1, it's just do a little thinking about what does feel good. What does excite you at this point in life? And if it's nothing, then maybe you do need to talk to a therapist. You know what I mean? If you've got that sort of feeling of hopelessness, but I just think it's small goals all along the way and building back. But, it's different for everybody. Everybody's different in how they respond. And so I tend to respond well to having groups and accountability and starting back. But, I've had my moments too. We all have. Sure. So those moments where you just, want to lie on the couch and you don't want to talk to anybody. So, depending on how long that's been going on. I mean, if it's just a couple of days, and sometimes you just need that.
Sometimes it's taking, giving yourself grace that's okay. But as you say, if it goes on too long, then that doesn't become okay.
Right. I mean, weeks, months, years, then
it's time to get off the couch.
Somebody needs to come haul you out of your house.
Indeed. Okay. So just a huge thank you. I'm so delighted we've connected. I hope that this podcast will help people to find your new Be Untethered challenge, because I think...
Thank you.
I mean, just totally something that I absolutely agree with, support, love, and, see the benefit of. So I really hope that people find a way forward with that.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, just a massive thank you for being on the podcast today.
Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure meeting you, and I know we'll stay connected.
Thanks for listening to today's episode. If you've enjoyed the conversation, please come and leave a review. If you go to the Apple Podcasts app and scroll down to the bottom of the podcast page, and then you'll find the ratings and review section. Please invite your friends to come and listen by sharing the link. And you can join the conversation and let me know who you'd like to hear interviewed and what topics you'd like discussed over at Facebook on the Magical Midlife group. You can also find me on Instagram at Lindsay DeSwart, where the conversation will also continue. I can't wait to see you on the next episode. And once again, keep living your magical midlife.